Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I want to thank you for joining me today as we continue our weekly discussions based on the book, The Integral Human Being. I wanted to share with you that this book, and let me change the slide, this um, this book is part of what we call the psychology series or psychology collection, which is a series of books, a 16 book, in fact, written by spiritual author Joanna de Angelis. And if I talk about her, it's because, of course, I'm here to go over the words that Joanna de Angelis so just gave it to us in such a manner that helps us understand where we are in our journey. But this book is was written in close collaboration by Divaldo Pereira Franco, and the most remarkable aspect of this book that we're studying, but the entire series in itself, is that Joanna de Angelis, she created this bridge, this linking point between spiritism and depth psychology. And with that, we'll discuss week by week some issues that we all face. It's really interesting because some of them are quite hidden from our awareness that it is an issue, right? But she brings issues and she even offers some therapy or insights. But if you consider how you and I, how we collectively speaking, are so vulnerable, this is a key moment where humanity as a whole is undergoing a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And because of it, this book is a gift to all of us because it will unveil, but also bring to the surface some root causes and solutions for those psychological issues that we may face. The book series, as you can see in the screen, this book itself, as you can see in the screen, is broken down into 9 parts. We're almost at the end of the 6th part. So, as far as I'm concerned, we are at the tail end of our meetings, maybe another couple of months that we'll meet to go over those future parts, the remaining parts. And today's topic itself is all about with the title Observer, Observation, and the Observed. We will, as you know, we will go over topics that have ranged from what is our routine? What does it feel when we say that we're lonely? What are some of our fears, myths, and even social phobias that are part of our day to day life? So, from that perspective, I love that the topics they are wide, right? But they are some sort of crescendo because every chapter we add another layer to the overall theme that we're studying here in this book, which is the integral human being. And so, with that, I just would like to invite all of you to explore solo or with me the themes that Joanna de Angelis brings to us, and with those two lenses, right? Spiritism and depth psychology. But let's go ahead and get started in earnest. When we start, and I have a photo of a captain of a ship looking, right, looking at something and actually pointing it out. And this is all about the idea of an observer. And I keep asking myself, Joanna, why are we even talking about that concept of being an observer, but also the observation of something, and also, of course, being in a society where we are now observed. There's a almost like a microscope that observes us everything we do, right? We're so connected. So I wanted to just pause and talk a little bit about this phenomenon, which is social media, and the impact of this discussion, or the impact, the social impact to where we are today. The good, the bad, and the ugly, perhaps, but mostly good. The phenomenon of social media has in many researcher more to do with our cultural positioning than its technological viewpoint. I studied, I went to school for management of technology, so I just love anytime we talk about what is the technology that led us to where we are today. And if we are indeed here with just a moment to analyze from that functional or technical lens, we would view that the platform has indeed helped engineers. It has helped entrepreneurs, right? All the actors and anybody who is at a place to be an influencer. And as such, all of us, it helped all of us reimagine our role, right? In the role that the technology itself can play in this extremely fast dissemination of information. It can also help, incredibly so, in a very positive way, community, right? Community creation, community development, and continued sustained engagement and development, right? Also, communication as a whole. So it's important because it brings for us to understand social media, right? But it brings not only this strong and powerful influence on opinions, but also has brought us the tools to break barriers to the access of information. For example, let's think about where would really be limited access to information in the breakout of conflicts in, I don't know, the area of the world that comes to my mind is somewhere in Congo, Africa, where it's so difficult for you to even be there to document, but also natural disasters, right at the point of what is happening, and quickly the world has access to that information. It also has led to opinion formation, right? Political discourse, but most importantly, in terms of the impact of our day to day life, that same structure, the same technical platforms helped us, and of course advanced with it, but helped us tremendously survive the unprecedented pandemic of 2020 all the way to 2022, when most of us were in some sort of social isolation. And that allowed still communicate with your loved ones and sustain a modicum of continuity with our lives. If we think again in the same vein, if we can go back to the early days of this millennium, we're talking about early 2000s, social media, in that technology at that time reconfigured all of our social practices in quite significant ways. And if we reflect real quickly, very briefly, this history of social media, we can argue that social media has provided uh, inputs for what is a phenomenon, but it's difficult for us to understand. So let's go quickly about it. We think about it, right? Back in 2000, and I can see myself with yes, I had a BlackBerry, loved it to no end because all of a sudden it gave me freedom to not being glued to my desk at the office. I'm an office worker in front of my computer to be able to answer to emails that will pop, that will contribute or deviate from the work at hand. So that's early 2000. We had one to one, mostly types of communications, be it on, I don't know, telephone, fax, yes, fax, and email and instant messaging. And right at that point, that's when the the phenomenon of public online communities were created, and we started to be able to see, as those were organized mostly by interest, that we can start to be part of those communities. All right, so we also saw at that time the rise not only in social network sites, but also the rise of social activism, because now you are part of something. And that can be as varied as, I am part of, I don't know, a quilt group, I'm not, or I'm part of a group that loves, I don't know, history. And because there is that community, we meet and we talk and we discuss, and I learn and I contribute to the learning of others, so on and so forth. This is long history for all of us. But this is really all about a new structure for connecting, right? And as it emerged, it is really created a new paradigm for how we connect, not only to content, to information, but also to people and, of course, ideas. Facebook, Twitters, Instagram, and so on. I know I'm dating myself because there are many, many, many more different types of social media platforms. They they have worked their way. They intruded somehow in most of us everyday's life, right? We have now this little thing, in my case, right? This mobile device, and in it we are seeing and we discuss at length the fact, like, don't go to bed and keep looking at the blue screen. It will impact your sleep, so on and so forth. There's so many bad practices because we have largely become um, quite dependent on the content that is given to us through a tiny little piece of technology. But what's so important is not only they intruded, if you will, in our day-to-day lives, but also if you look at the breadth, right, and the speed of adoption from say 20 years ago to today, it has been, it's omnipresent, and it has an impact that is truly global. If you look in the most I don't know, disenfranchised communities, I'm talking about my community where I live. We're speaking of those that don't have a home to live and are today homeless, and each and every one of them that I see have a device with them, and they are in social media. So in any case, this is truly an extraordinary phenomenon of social media that is spread, and it's mostly at the fingertips of everyone. But let's pause to think about it. A byproduct of this new structure of how we connect, how we communicate, how we engage, how we feel part of something larger, is that it is now reflective of norms of our society. It also reflects how deep and broad our connections are. And I'm saying this is very mechanical. Of course, for those who do not engage in social media, you are not seeing this, but the byproduct is, oh, I'm rich because I have 2,000 friends and 50 million followers. And we know this is not the case. But regardless of that, this is the phenomenon that it has taken place for the past 20 plus years. But what Joanna wants to talk about it is, back to a temporal an atemporal discussion. There are three distinct elements in any given situation. Anything, just put in your minds whatever. It can be a volcano erupting in Iceland, or a tree falling in a state park, whatever. It doesn't matter, a natural event or not, but in any situation, there is a person, there is the object itself, and the act of falling, erupting, etc. And historically, this is now going back to, uh, maybe decades ago. Socially, let's think about historically, socially, those events were isolated. And for us to have access to those events, there were journalists, for example, that would it, abstract themselves. They would go, and I love this because one of my favorite things to do in life is to watch nature documentaries, right? But you can see those photojournalists, those individuals that are documenting an act, and they're there, they move themselves, they extract themselves, and they observe, and the object being observed is observed from afar, right? So that there's a distance between the observer and the observation itself, and therefore the observer has that distance from the act. Whew, a lot of obs here. Why is this important for us to reflect? And I find it fascinating because of the discussion that we had just before about the social media phenomenon, and how we we are no longer able to be disconnected from the whole. Well, Joanna de Angelis brings here that the fact that this, right, this um, context of perhaps wars, nature documentary alike, reveal a distance that was actually necessary, right, required to maintain the integrity of the act, aka the observed. So if I can think about it, I don't know, the chase between a cheetah and a gazelle, be it the mama gazelle or the baby gazelle, it doesn't matter, and it's just boom, that intensity of the chase, and all that it takes, and the more the photo journalist documents from the beginning to the actual super fast chase to the end of the act, the photographer or the videographer cannot, should not interfere, right? There is a counter to this, and not so long ago, David Attenborough discussed this nature documentary of something that happened that aired, and it was actually uh, led to so much grief to those that saw the documentary. which was if I remember correctly, the sea lions, because of nature and issues with their loss of territory and the climate changes that we're going through, they kept moving now instead of a beach into a cliff. And they filmed something never seen before, where hundreds of those magnificent animals actually would go all the way with a lot of sacrifice just because of the morphology of their bodies, all the way to the peak. And then they couldn't go any further. They would throw themselves into the beach and kill into what looked like a mass suicide of those sea lions. And there's so much grief. There's so much. Why didn't you do anything about it? And that's the discussion that we have here. Those types of activities required you to keep that distance. Well, Joanna de Angelis comes in to remind that the distance between the act and the observer, to a certain extent, has exempted the observer from any sense of responsibility or even any emotional response to the act. And I'm talking about empathy or compassion. So a lot of those individuals that saw this mass suicide, they're like, this is touching me to the core of my being, to see so many of those sea lions throwing themselves and killing themselves. Well, there are many other types of events like that elicit an emotional response, and now we feel that we can no longer see and remain unattached, right? uh as you know, we're going through this is 2024, end of May, and since the very end of April of this year throughout to May, and at this point, I don't know how much longer it will continue. Storms and heavy rains in the north of, I'm sorry, in the month of May, in the south of Brazil led to an enormous percentage of cities and towns in the state of Brazil. We're talking now an estimated 93% of an entire state. And I understand that for the US, for comparison purposes, that state equates to Nevada, roughly, right? So, not a tiny state, and 93% of its territory has been impacted. 93% of its cities and towns have been impacted as this unprecedented climate related disaster of catastrophic proportions happened, right? It's still happening. And what I bring to you is the plethora of photos, aerial photos of unimaginable impact and destruction on one hand. On the other hand, we see scenes that have touched. There was one scene in particular of a horse, brown color, caramel color horse that it was found on top of the roof of a house. Somebody took a photo, and that elicited, it became really a viral response to what was going on. The good news is, despite the need for, I think, about 10 to 12 different firefighters to rescue one animal, Caramel, as it's now been nicknamed, is safe and has survived, and it's eating and healthy. But anyways, the question here is, um, because of the enormous amount of reviews and widespread news about what's going on, compassionate responses and an amazing global and local um, response with acts of solidarity through financial donations, through shipments of every sort of items, be it water or clothing or things for the shelters to survive, right? And this is really an interesting because it is now very contemporary to this airing of this class today. This not a class, but a book discussion that we see the touching evidence that we can no longer remain dissociated from the events around us, right? And if we think about it, the complexities of everything, of life, of our journeys, our destinies, our ability to have a strong, I don't know, inherited financial well-being or or well-structured education, upbringing, and those elements, those factors that in the past put me in a path that was individual or family, but still in a very individual path, right, for my success, that no longer exists. We are in this new world that all of us need to be in the path of success, or all of us will be in the path of failure, right? And the more we are aware of what's going on in our surroundings, the more we become responsible for everybody else's well being, right? So, Joanna de Angelis gives an example of how this new state of being is like this wave in the ocean, right? And she says it is, we are the wave in the ocean, but the ocean is not the wave. Whoa, what are we talking about? One belongs to the other, one impacts the other, one is impacted by the other, but we are not the collective. Because she says, as waves, we cannot forget of our personal individuality, right? And it is this, remember, we're studying the integral human being. But in this case of the discussion about the observer, the observed, and the observation, is that while we're integrated into the whole, we are still, we must still be an individual, right? And excuse me. And as such, we have to maintain our individuality despite the integration to the whole, to the ocean, to the vast web of communications that are streamed via social media on a daily basis. And I'd love to read to everyone. It's in the slide. I don't know if you can read for the size of the characters here, but the eye that observes, this is Joanna de Angelis, the eye that observes is at the same time that is observed and also responsible for the observation. So this is, we're not going to get into this, but it is the responsibility, but also accountability of what we see, right? The act of observing, I mean, putting my hands as a binoculars, right? I'm looking at something, what I'm responsible for, my reaction to this observation, and what do I do with this? And the fact of the matter is, no matter what, we can no longer isolate from the collective. We can no longer stop the the evolutionary train, if you will, because we are also part of this one cog in the cogwheel of observing and being observed as well. So as we move on, Joanna de Angelis also tells that okay, observation is a part of life that likewise depends on the observer. Why are we bringing that up again? Well, think about it. What I do with what I observe really impacts who I am and how my response will impact the whole. So from that perspective, right, of the whole being observed, and we can think about the ocean, if you will, it all of us as waves in this ocean, individual waves, nevertheless waves in the larger ocean, we all carry some degree of responsibility for the benefits of the whole. And we are reaching a point that is no longer possible to now transfer the accountability or responsibility to the well being of all into somebody else. It is us that will determine the well being of the collective. And it's very important because one of the things that we as escape mechanism, right, we actually move out of there's something that's going on and we immediately exempt ourselves from being responsible or accountable for what happened, and we blame, we project onto the others. And yes, this is what we do. But Joanna says, let's remember that our journey on earth is one journey of evolution. And as a whole, we are all achieving or pushed to achieve this psychological maturity that no longer allows us to be distanced and not feel inside of us, because it hits us right here, right? It hits us in the gut, it hits us in our heart, it hits in all of our being, this need to do something. So for example, the if you will, and this is from the thoughts of Joanna de Angelis, right, as an example. But if I am not responsible, I don't feel responsible for supporting, for acting however I can, um, somebody else will. And because it's not balanced anymore, that individual or individual organization will be required to have an overburden of effort from one side on behalf of the fact that the other is indifferent, is abstaining from supporting. Therefore, it leads to a sense of scarcity or not enough required effort to maintain balance. And it really betrays our lack of being sensitized to the situation, right? So let's go back to what's going on with the south of Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul. The enormity of that situation is equally demonstrating the beautiful response from so many. And we can see through that the fact that the existential mechanism that is developing from this larger aptitude for psychological maturity in all of us is leading to a solution that is it's just impossible to see in many cases, because we have indeed reached a point where we're no longer moved to feel pity about our weakness, but we're now moved to attempt to strengthen everyone else instead. So, because of our free will, right, our freedom to do whatever, we understand there are those of us who behave differently, even though that at a perhaps unconscious level, or not, those that are indifferent, they are actually aware that they are conspiring against the overall balance. And the overall balance, we're talking about the entire earth, not just the south of Brazil, right? We're all in this together. Those that are indifferent, according to Joanna de Angelis, they will not feel engaged, they will feel alone, and the whole will go back to a state of balance, will recompose itself without them, she says. And this new wave of evolved state of the whole, in this case, of our planet, our home right now, right, will assume a new form. So it is rather optimistic that I go through the content of this chapter thinking, in the midst of the worst, in this case, a catastrophic natural disaster that is impacting so many, we can see the birth, if you will, of the the necessary um, heart to heart feelings that will bring us to not only have empathy, right, which means i I can understand how you feel in your moment of pain, but also compassion, which means I am driven to an active um, role in which I, the observer, see what is being observed, and in my observation, it also contains an active response to the event. We are immersed and we are responsible for the general sense of harmony and balance of the universe, and because of it, we are called to contribute to the maintenance of the equilibrium of what we're observing, right? And it's really beautiful to see that, because we're no longer, as a conclusion, we're no longer able to observe and leave the observation as something that is frivolous, that there is no impact. All of it has. So, with that, I just wanted to say thank you, right? Thank you so much for being here with me. And I invite you to join me next chapter, that we continue this part of the book, psychological maturity. And it ends that part with the chapter called psychological transformation. But I want to say thank you for your time. I appreciate all of you that are here with me. Send me any feedback, any questions, any critique that you have, any perhaps uh, stories of how you know Joanna de Angelis, perhaps, or how do you feel about this subject. With that, I'd say thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.